your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
Buenos noches, fanáticos del terror, or as we normally say, good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Horoscope. I am Jerry, this is Matt, and in honor of Cinco De Mayo being right around the corner, Matt had chosen this week that we're going to get into some Mexican horror movies. And that's, our friends south of the border have a history in the horror industry that goes back into the 1930s, but it wasn't a real prominent in their cinema for many, many years. What did you like about this category, Matt?
Well, one of my favorite things about film in general is just experiencing different cultures and their way of expressing various genres, and in this case, horror movies. I thought both of these movies, they offer a glimpse into a cruel fate that's bestowed onto the characters in very different ways. And I thought both the movies were very interesting.
When Mexican horror first came about, it was kind of pushed to the back burner. The production companies in Mexico were pushing westerns and dramas in the 30s and 40s, and it kind of took to the 50s and 60s before any strong foothold really came about. And there was a period of time in the 50s, 60s, and even the 70s where a lot of the Mexican horror it took American or European horror standards, and they combined it with masked wrestlers, lucha libres, and there was a ton of Santos versus the zombies and those types of movies that were really kind of fun and enjoyable. And before people scoff at the idea of a hero in a mask fighting bad guys, every Marvel movie does $1 billion.
Absolutely, yeah.
But these were characters you could catch, at the Coliseum or at the arena, performing in the ring on the weekend, and then you could see them in their movies. And they became huge stars in Mexico through both their ring performance and their film performance. Which I thought was kind of a cool and unique subset of Mexican horror.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into some of those.
I've seen a couple. I've seen clips from some, and they're just similar to last week we talked about Bubba Hotep. They're almost fun in their ridiculousness, and they embrace it.
Right. Which I love movies like that. I mean, you look at like Bubba Hotep or Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Just ridiculous premises sometimes are the best.
Yeah. Yeah, and they made a whole subgenre out of it. In the 60s and 70s, they started to develop more into their cultural legends and the Chupacabra and La Llorona and certain myths in Mexican folklore. So it's kind of an interesting history of Mexican horror. And like you said, we got a couple good movies to get into this week.
Yeah, and there's also sometimes you'll see that the heavy Catholicism from the Mexican culture too as well. And one of the directors, Del Toro, who's an atheist, said it was kind of hard being an atheist as a Mexican director because there was a lot of influence for Catholicism, and so he was trying to like navigate through that in his way, and he came up with some very interesting movies.
He sure did. In fact, our first film is the first film from Guillermo del Toro, a film called Cronos from 1992. And this is an interesting take on, a few weeks ago, we talked about vampire lore, and we did a bloodsucker category. This movie is a whole different twist where it's almost a scientific and chemical approach to the vampire myth. So really interesting how he, deconstructs and rebuilds something new.
Yeah, and it also has this like it's very Faustian in nature, as far as like there's a fear of death and wanting to live forever, as opposed to like a traditional vampire movie where they're like it's usually the vampire just finds the victim and it just makes them like bestows that upon them, that fate. Whereas this one almost is more of a choice. Yeah,
a real desired choice for some. Our movie starts in 1536 with an alchemist who invents a device that is the key to eternal life. And that's all we really know. 400 years later, the building collapses, and we see the white-skinned alchemist was among the people killed in the collapse. So we know at this point he's 400 and something years old. So we believe his device worked. And when they investigate, the investigators go to his home and they find a woman hung upside down, being bled out into a bowl. And there's no recorded history of what they call the Cronos device that he created. So that's kind of the quick lore they give you to bring you up to the modern tale.
It's just a couple minutes, just a quick intro.
Yep. We jump to 1996, and our main character is an antique dealer named Jesus Grease, and he receives an archangel statue, and there's cockroaches climbing out of it, and there's a hole where one of the eyes is missing, and he discovers it's hollow. He's knocking on it and shaking it, and that's where the cockroaches are coming out of. There's a hollow part to it, and he opens it up and he finds this beetle scarab-looking metallic device, which is the Cronos.
Yeah, and it was almost like Del Toro was kind of like making a metaphor to religion with the hollow statue, and the it's like a dead religion. It's there's something about that's dead that's not like relevant anymore. Like the cockroach is coming out of it, and then out of that is this new thing that gives life. It was pretty interesting. I saw a lot of metaphors in this movie.
Absolutely, and the main character Jesus is an overtly religious man,
right?
Who soon has to deal with some conflict in his moral choices.
Yeah.
We meet a rich man named Dieter, who keeps sending his nephew Angel looking for archangel statues. Now, Dieter is sick and appears to be somewhat on his deathbed, and he's looking for the archangel statues because he's looking for the Cronos device.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of them in his place. You can just see he's been trying to look for the right one.
Yeah. And there's more hanging in his place than you would have even known existed.
Yeah.
Angel actually ends up buying the statue from Jesus, but of course, at this point, Jesus has already removed the device. He's holding the Cronos in his hand. Again, it looks like a scarab or a giant beetle. And he turns a dial on it, and it seems to awaken the mechanism, which grows legs like an insect and then pierces and attaches himself to his hand.
Yeah.
And of course,
the legs kind of come out like they flare out, and then they're almost like little knives. Yeah.
Latch on. And of course, he's freaking out a little bit. Finally gets it to close back up, and the legs retract, and you just see now the blood covered Cronos device kind of folds in on itself back to its original shape, and I thought that was kind of a cool scene.
Yeah, like it almost like has a mind of its own.
And shockingly, that night he's drawn back to it again, and he takes it and does it once again, even knowing what it's going to happen. But he's saying, back to your point about the religion, he's saying his prayers while he's playing with this clearly non-holy device.
Yeah. It's it's taking over him. His blood's changing, and he's like thirsting for it. He can't get satisfied. He just needs it.
And there's a clear, allegory to drug addiction or any addiction for that matter that keeps coming up through this movie, because he's forced to make decisions that he would not make and do things this man would never do on his own.
Yeah, he's compelled by some it's some kind of internal addiction, like you said.
So he takes the this time when he does the device, a scorpion-like tail comes out and injects him. And the whole while, his granddaughter Aurora sees him doing all this and is watching him and is very concerned for him, obviously. The next day, Jesus feels younger and energized. He's got, he's got all kinds of energy, and he wants to light the world on fire.
Yeah, he's got like a little pep in his step. At first, in the beginning, he's kind of like the old shopkeeper, like the old sweet kind shopkeeper, like Geppetto.
Very Geppetto. I was just going to say very much a Geppetto. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he comes downstairs. He's kind of a little bit more Frank Sinatra. He's feeling young, and he's I think he shaves his mustache
Yeah.
off, and he's like, "Hey, what do you think?"
Yeah. Don't I look younger?
Yeah,
Because he feels good.
Yeah.
He goes into his antique shop and he finds it trashed. And the only thing he finds is Angel's business card there. So he takes the card and he goes to the address on the card to go see him. And this is where he's introduced to Dieter, who has a notebook from the alchemist and shows him notes, including drawings of the device. And Dieter thinks he has the device with him, and he steals his package, only to find out it was a trick, and the device was home.
Yep.
So that's their first encounter, and you can see this is going to be a conflict brewing throughout the movie.
Yeah, which is interesting because on one hand, he wants the device. He wants to live forever. He's like the evil, rich, bad guy. And then Jesus it was inflicted on him, and he doesn't want it. And so you have this very interesting dynamic between them for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, yeah. He doesn't. He wasn't actively seeking it, but now that he has it, he's hesitant to get rid of it, at least at first.
Right.
When he gets home, Aurora has actually hidden the device, again, concerned for her grandfather. She stuffed it inside of her teddy bear. But after they have a sweet conversation, she gives it to him, and now he actually sticks it onto his chest, which I just thought was, and he did it right in front of her.
Yeah, well, that shows you what addiction will make people do, in front of their loved ones.
Yeah, and a little girl. I mean, she's 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there.
Yeah, an alcoholic father will come home and pound vodka in front of their kids.
Yep.
Not realizing the damage it's causing.
Feeling, invigorated, as we talked about. Jesus and his family, including his granddaughter, they go to a party, and a man at the party gets a bloody nose, and Jesus follows him into the bathroom. And this was kind of a disturbing scene. The man, cleans himself up and leaves. There's blood all over the counter, and Jesus starts licking the blood off the counter, which is very, I don't know why, it's very disturbing.
Yeah. He's also like licking it off the floor. Like he gets down on the floor and starts like he's like patting his tongue on it and just like licking it like a dog would like drink their water.
Yeah,
it doesn't have this like crazed look in his eyes. It's almost like he has to do this.
Yeah, a man comes out and wipes up the counter, so he's forced to stop, and then he finds the splatters on the floor. And
and you can just see the desperation of addiction.
Yeah, it's a very insightful scene. I thought well done to speak to exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and subtly too. It's not like this ravenous thing where he's like ripping his shirt off to get to it. He's just like, oh, what's this? And like he just kind of like goes down there and just does it. Like it was very interesting.
It's like he really doesn't want to lick a bathroom floor any more than you or I would.
Right.
He can't help himself.
But he's like, well, it's here.
Yeah, exactly. And while he's down there, we see Shoes walk into the scene and kick him unconscious.
Yep. Which I thought, good. Someone has to. This guy's licking the floor.
Yeah.
I thought it was the janitor.
Somebody kick him just for being sick.
For doing it, yeah.
He comes to, and he's in a car with Angel, who beats him up and is trying to get the device from him. And he beats him pretty bad, puts him back in the car, and pushes the car over the cliff, thinking, you're not going to give it to us. We're gonna kill you, and we'll get it some other way. But when Angel goes back to his uncle, Dieter hits him with his cane and cracks him across the face because he said, you didn't stab him in the heart. So he doesn't believe he's actually dead.
Right. He's like, you idiot. Yeah. He played Angel's this like stereotypical classic stupid goon.
And he's played by Ron Perlman, who went on to have a lengthy history with Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
Did several movies together.
Which is funny. Ron Perlman was supposed to speak Spanish in this movie, but his Spanish was so bad, Del Toro was like, just speak English.
Yeah. It's an interesting in that, some characters in the movie speak Spanish, and others speak English in the same scene. It's not like dubbed. It's just a mix.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that.
I did
kind
too.
of made it feel. It kind of made it feel realistic.
I thought the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It was, of course, Del Toro is bilingual, so it was fine for him.
Yeah.
We see Jesus in a coffin. We see him at the funeral home being treated as a dead body, and we have at this point, no reason to believe otherwise, other than what we know about him. But he comes to and manages to escape his coffin just before it's put into the cremator.
Yeah, you get you don't even see him leave. They just show the cremator about to close the casket and he's not in there. And so no one's the wiser.
Yes, it's from an angle where the guy running the crematorium wouldn't notice.
Right.
So Angel shows up to verify he might say, "I want to see the body one last time," says he's a friend of the family.
Yeah, and they say, medium or well done?
Yeah, it's in there.
Kind of cracks the joke. Yeah.
So he sees the coffin cooking and believes that the body's in there, but no one knows, like you said, that it's empty. So Jesus is now, his skin is starting to rot and he looks decrepit. He looks pale, but he goes home and Aurora lets him in, and he uses the Cronos device, and he ends up sleeping in a large toy box, which I thought was a real cool metaphor for the classic, the coffin that a vampire hides in. He escaped the coffin and went and slept in a toy box.
Right. Returning to your innocence, returning to your childhood. I'm sure there was some kind of metaphor there. But it was interesting because she makes that for him. Throughout this entire movie, Aurora is always like watching out for him.
Yeah, she has little or no spoken lines, but plays a very vital role in how some of the situations unfold.
And her name actually translated means dawn. It's like the new era. So she represents like the dawn of her family, right? And even when she's on the coffin that she makes for him, she draws a little sun.
Yeah, exactly. So true. Jesus and Aurora, they go to Dieter's warehouse. They want to get the alchemist book because they're looking for a cure. He's decided that this is unraveling his life very quickly. He wants out.
Yeah, he says he can't. He knows he's alive, but he can't feel anything. He doesn't feel alive. Yeah, he says he'd rather just be dead.
Yeah. Dieter pulls his ragged skin off of his face and shows a shiny white underneath, like he tells him he's being reborn. And we think back to the alchemist who had the complete white skin when his body was found 400 and something years old.
Yeah.
So Dieter offers him a way out. He said, "I'll give you a way out in exchange for the Chronos." He doesn't
tell him though. He just says there's a way out. Yeah.
Yes, it's a bargain he has to make.
It's that Faustian deal, right? Making a deal with the devil.
And as he's considering agreeing to this, Dieter stabs him, and then quickly mounts him on the ground, and is about to impale his heart. But before he can do that, Aurora knocks the old man off, hits him in the back of the head with a
cane
pipe
or something like that,
cane or a stick, and knocks him out. And this was another scene that surprised me. Jesus feeds on Dieter right in front of Aurora.
Yeah, it's like he can't stop. Even though he wants a way out, he just literally said, "I want a way out," and he goes right back to it.
Yes, and that surprised me a little bit because he was searching for his humanity.
Well, I think it shows the power. It shows the power of this addiction. There's the power of how it just overcomes people. There's no escaping it.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Angel comes down and sees what's going on here, and he thinks his uncle's dead, and he's actually thrilled with it. He's set to inherit all of his uncle's money and his business, and his uncle doesn't treat him very well. But as he starts to celebrate, his uncle starts to come too, and just to make sure he finishes him off, he stomps on his throat just to make sure it's done.
Yeah, breaks his neck.
At this point, Jesus and Aurora were hiding. He pops out and he hits Angel with the same stick, and they escape up onto the roof.
He gets him in the nose again. He's like, "No, I nose again." And and there's a joke that he's trying to get a nose job throughout the movie. Like, so
Yeah, he got one, not what he was looking for.
yeah, exactly.
Angel is not incapacitated. He follows him up to the roof, and there he beats Jesus badly. He's hitting him with the cane. He's kicking him. He's punching him, and he's gonna end him. And at the last minute, Jesus manages to distract him, and then he grabs him in a tackle, throwing both of them off of the roof through a glass window down to the floor of the warehouse.
I thought that part was funny because he pulled the old, "Hey, what's that?" And then he looked, and then they tackled him.
Yeah, and he was willing to sacrifice himself for, like he said, he'd rather be dead than what he is. An Angel is killed in the fall, but Aurora revives Jesus using the Cronos.
Yep.
And as he comes to, he notices Aurora, her hand is bleeding. And he's leaning forward, and you can see it in his eyes. He's desiring the blood.
Very tense moment.
But he stops himself. For the first time, he manages to show some restraint over the desire, and he stops himself. He does not feed on her, and instead he takes a big rock and smashes the Cronos device. You can hear all the internal mechanisms are all crashing and shot. He believes this will end his life and the curse, and is surprised when he remains alive.
Yeah, he was told that it's like a filter, so like, yeah, he thinks by destroying it, it'll just kind of end the cycle. But I think it's really just it's just kind of putting him through. It's going to drag out his death.
We've seen in other vampire movies when the head vampire is killed, the people he turned are released.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen.
Right.
He thought it was going to happen, but it didn't.
Right.
So he returns home, where he appears to have aged greatly during that time.
Yeah, it's taking its effect. It's becoming like the skin that was on just his head and his stomach. Now it's like his entire body. So like he's like shedded the skin.
Yeah. He lays in bed and he's at home, and you see, his wife comes to him, and Aurora is there, and you see the sun come up, and the sun washes over him, which he couldn't stand the sun as he was changing before, but the sun doesn't have any effect, and the movie ends. So you're left to wonder to some degree. He doesn't look well, and he doesn't look like he's going to last long, but he doesn't seem to be a vampire anymore either.
Yeah, I think in that last scene he's dead. I think that's it. That's why it's not really affecting him. I think he finally died. Like they show him like breathing heavy in the run room, and then the final scene when they his wife Mercedes and Aurora go in there, like I think that's him just dead, and that's why they're kind of like paying their respects in there, because like Aurora's kind of like crying on him.
Gotcha. I didn't read it that way, but that makes sense.
Yeah,
definitely makes sense. This movie, I thought this movie was enjoyable. It wasn't a 5-star knockout, but for a first film, you can see some very signature Guillermo del Toro style that he grew with over his illustrious career so far.
Yeah, it didn't have I don't think it had a big budget, or did it have a big budget?
No, it had a small budget.
It was a small budget,
very modest.
Yep.
But
it had a throwback to those old school Universal horror films from the 1930s, 40s. It had that feel to it.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I do like that. Again, we always talk about things that take a common thing, be it a vampire or whatever, and try to do something different with it. And they definitely did that.
They don't even say the word vampire in this movie. There's no, it's just like when we talked about Martin, there's no garlic, there's no any of that. It's just its own twist. But you know it is while you're watching it, And
this one comes from science, not from any mythological or spiritual.
Yeah, it's from an alchemist that made it. Yeah, so it kind of explains the whole mythos behind it. It's not just like, oh, how did this all happen? It's like, well, they show you in the beginning someone created this thing.
Yeah. No, a good flick and a good start to a career for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Our second Mexican horror film is called The Untamed, and it's from 2016, directed by Amat Escalante. And this movie is a completely different animal than what we just talked about.
Yep.
This movie is overtly and strongly sexual.
Mm.
In fact, it opens with a completely naked woman leaning against a wall, being pleasured by a creature's tentacle.
Mm. This is another movie that deals with addiction as well.
It definitely does.
Yep.
And actually, there's an '80s movie, a Frank Henenlotter film called Brain Damage, where there's a creature that's attached itself to a teenage boy, a young man, and he injects him with this feel good serum if he kills for him. And when I first saw this movie, I started to think of the parallels of that very addictive creature.
Interesting.
After this tentacle is done with this young woman, the creature bites her in the abdomen, and she leaves the cabin with blood all over the side of her shirt. And of course, we don't know the history. We know nothing at this point other than, wow, that was weird.
Yeah, there's real heavy tones of like the dangers of sex and intimacy in this entire movie. It's played out a lot of different ways. But like the monster being hidden away, kind of like people's people's secrets, like secret sexual desires that they kind of do like underground. We saw like with like the AIDS virus that kills people through sexual intercourse. This thing kind of devours people through sexual intercourse.
First through the addiction,
Right.
and then ultimately
Yes.
real devouring.
Yeah, and so it's like and then layered within all of that in the movie, there's a lot of relationship drama that's going on, and so you can also kind of think that like the idea that we can extract sex from emotional intimacy from relationships is detrimental to communities. So because you can't, right? So like just to have this like this sexual liberated, everyone just kind of do what they want attitude is actually detrimental to communities, which is kind of like it seems like that's where they're going with this throughout the movie.
Yeah, we see a lot of different directions and a lot of different relationships unfold here.
Yeah, it's very
Mostly
layered.
with a core group of 4 people. We cut right from the scene with the tentacle to Alejandro and Angel are in bed, husband and wife, and Angel kind of takes her from behind, and we see it from her point of view, but they start having sex, and she seems very unhappy, very unsatisfied.
Yep.
And she when he's done, she goes to the shower and she begins to pleasure herself.
Yep.
This movie opens with just nonstop sex.
Yep. Yeah.
And
But there's also like emotional distance between the characters.
very much, yeah. She doesn't leave that intimate encounter feeling anything but unhappy.
Yep. Yep. Which is a theme that happens throughout this whole movie again.
Yeah. The kids interrupt her before she can finish in the shower, and such is the angst of being a mom. And I thought that was a little bit funny. But
yeah.
We see Veronica who got bit at the beginning. She goes to the hospital, and she's being treated by Fabian, who's a doctor, and they become friends through their conversations. She tells him it was a dog bite, and he offers to help her go find the dog so they can make sure it's not rabid.
Right, which is apparently a nursing practice.
Yes, that reminded me of American Werewolf in London, where the medical personnel go way beyond their scope to get involved in other things.
Yeah. Good parallel right there.
And we find out that Fabian is actually Alejandro's sister, and they agree they're all going to hang out. So we cut to a party, and we see Angel, Alejandro's husband, and Fabian, her brother, are both at the party.
Right.
And they leave together. And sure enough, Angel is having sex with Fabian, even though in public, he insults him and uses derogatory names for Fabian being openly gay, where obviously Angel is
he's projecting
gay.
Right. He's projecting very clearly, like, oh, I would never be that.
I don't like those people. I can't stand to be around them.
Yep.
When in fact that's just not the case.
Right.
So he's very much hypocritical.
Yeah, he's very toxic. He's a very toxic male, as they say.
Yes. Veronica brings her friend Fabian, who we know has a relationship with Angel and we know is gay. She brings him to the creature. And the couple who house him, the Vegas, they tell Veronica she cannot visit anymore herself. It's become dangerous for her. And we find out that she's been visiting this creature for years.
Yeah. Since she was little or something like that. Yeah.
Which is weird, like how little, you don't want to go there, I guess, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what all of this stuff is an allegory to, just the dangers of what that can do to someone's life. And I mean, look how she treats the relationship she's in with people. She's very distant and void and emotionally distant, and it's leading her down it's led her down this path. And there's also an allegory to this thing representing sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Because it's abusive and it hurts people, so it's been hurting her for years, and she still keeps coming back, and she's distant to the people she loves,
Yeah. And you could make a case that you have parallel abusers in the creature and Angel who seem to,
absolutely,
have sex but mistreat the people they're with.
Yep.
Yeah. So the four of them end up going out together, which ends with Angel getting drunk, getting in a fight, and getting tossed out of the bar. And then he gets physical with his wife. And we just see Angel start to unravel. At this point, Fabian stops responding to his texts, and we figure out that Fabian is enamored with the creature as everyone else who comes into contact with it is.
Yeah.
So he doesn't need this side action with his brother-in-law. He now has the creature to fulfill his desires.
Right.
So he breaks it off.
Yeah.
And Angel's very upset about it. And,
he didn't see it coming. And he, it goes back to him being abusive. He's not someone who's going to be broken up with or told no, or, he's an abusive person.
He even calls him gay slurs while he's angry about being broken up with.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously, to any reasonable person, makes no sense.
Right. He just wants to say hurtful things and be mean. That's what he does.
We cut to a farmer finding Fabian's body in a field, and he's naked, he's beaten, he's concussed, and the way the way they term it is he was a victim of sexual aggression.
Yep.
And he is in a coma. So Veronica and Alejandro go to Fabian's house looking for information on what might have happened to him.
Yeah.
And I think they're looking for some documentation, his birth certificate, in case he passes away.
Yep.
But what they find is his cell phone and a list of violent and threatening texts from Angel.
Yep.
From being broken up with.
Yeah, and I think it's Alejandra, like, looking at it, and you can see she like covers her mouth. She's like, "Oh my God!" She's like reading all of these texts, and it's like it's the evidence that that there's some kind of circumstantial evidence that he possibly was the one that did this.
So from these handful of texts, she's dealing with her husband's cheating on her. Mm-hmm. Her husband's cheating on her with her brother. Her husband is pursuing gay sex, and her husband may also be the man who nearly murdered her brother.
Yeah,
all in a handful of texts. She's hit with all this.
Yeah, that's a lot of that's an anxiety-driven blow to the head.
And so Angel is arrested, and at this point, Veronica brings Alejandro to the creature, and it's really weird. She's watching her kids while she's inside with the creature. It just creates this weird dynamic, and it almost, you talk about the addictive part of this, and it's like, yeah, this doesn't make sense on the surface, but we're going to do it anyways.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it also goes to show, like, going back to the father drinking, getting drunk in front of their kids, like what parents will expose their kids to just to get their own kicks, or just to fulfill an addiction that they have, and not even realizing that they're putting other people at danger, especially their children, because people do that in real life. You see it happen. It's sad.
Yeah. My favorite scene in the entire movie. The opening scene showed a shot from space. So I don't know if they're just supposed to infer that this creature is an alien that landed on our planet.
Yeah,
But now we see it, and it's kind of funny. But there's a crash site. There's a crater
yeah,
in the earth in the
yeah,
forest, and every animal in the forest is piled in that crater,
yeah.
having sex like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, it was like the South Park Woodland Creatures episode.
There's a pair of rabbits, there's a pair of goats,
Yeah, there's a snake.
everything's in there.
There's snakes and skunks, and it's just I'm like, how did they? These are great special effects. I don't know
It's
how they got these animals to do this.
it's like if Noah's Ark was a porn. Like that scene,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
5 or 10 seconds long.
All it's missing is that disco saxophone, and
It
it's in
was
slow
crazy,
motion.
but it cuts back to, we know Alejandro's there to be with the creature, but we haven't really seen the creature at this point. We've
Yeah.
seen glimpses and parts, and we finally
Yeah.
get a better view of it. And it's honestly like, this is the description I wrote down. It's like an octopus of dicks.
It's exactly what it is.
It's just this big ball of
Yeah.
muscle
Yeah.
and tentacles that look
It's a
like,
penis octopus.
it's exactly what it is. And when Alejandro returns home, she hugs Veronica, giving the message that she really needed what she got there.
Yeah.
She continues to visit the creature. Sometimes we see the kids playing out in the yard of the house.
Yeah.
Again, which is just makes no
Bizarre.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, kids
Yeah,
go run around in circles out in the grass, out in the forest here. I'm going to be in this house doing things.
Just the most, and the people that own the house too, like they're allowing it. Like, it's just irresponsible all around. But it's almost like maybe it kind of speaks to the gravity of how powerful this thing is. Like, even the animals themselves gravitate to it. Like, it just pulls people in by their primal instincts that can't even help it.
And the Vegas, they refer to it as pure essence of desire.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you're weak minded, like these people are, if you're weak minded, it just pulls you in like gravity.
Yeah. Yeah. That's at this point, she visits Fabian and unhooks his life support. It doesn't appear he's coming back, so she lets him go, and she's going to leave the area. Meanwhile, Angel's wealthy parents get him out of jail, but they want him to leave the area because you're an embarrassment. You've embarrassed this family.
It's in the papers.
It's you go here, go there. We'll send you money, but don't stay around here. At this point, he considers suicide. You can tell he's really
He's
down.
sulking. Yeah.
We cut back to Veronica, who had left the whole situation. We see her meet a man at a truck stop, and she goes to a hotel and has sex with him. And you can see she's very unsatisfied, very unfulfilled with the encounter.
Yeah. Right back to the emotional distance. Yeah.
You know what she really wants, even though she's been shut off, right?
She wants the octopus penis.
Yes, she does. Angel goes to Alejandro and confronts her and says he wants his family back together. And she says no. And she tells him that she knows about his relationship with Fabian. She knows what he really is. And she doesn't want to be with him. And he needs to leave. And once again, he gets violent with her. And, he smacks her and he knocks her down, and he's reaching in to pull out his gun only to shoot himself in the leg.
Yeah.
And
almost gets his main artery right there. I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah. He's wailing and screaming in agony.
Yep.
And of course she helps him. You think she's helping him.
Yeah. This was kind of a good twist right here. I was like, what is she doing? But
yeah, I mean, I could get calling 911, but the guy was pulling the gun to use on you.
Right.
But she's got a better plan.
Yeah.
So she puts him in the back of a pickup and she drives out to the woods. And when she gets to the woods, we see Veronica's bike is there in the woods already. And she drags Angel through the woods, drags him into the house, and we see Veronica's dead body is there. And we realize she couldn't stay away, even if it meant harm or even if it meant death. The addiction was too strong.
Yeah.
She drags Angel into the room. I guess you'd call it the creature's room. He has kind of his own lair.
Yeah, it has this like almost like heroin house or something. Like, like they're just junkies in there.
Yeah. And they leave it to its room, and she puts him in there, and we see from the rafters, we see the creature, the twisted mangle of tentacles and penises, and we just see it descend down onto
the hentai.
Angel. And we just assume the worst because we cut to Alejandro and Mr. Vega are dumping the bodies of Angel and Veronica into a pit.
Yeah.
And she notes, boy, it's getting awful full of bodies.
Yeah, it's piling up. Yeah.
And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah. And she runs out. I think she runs back into town and gets her kids, and like that it just ends right there.
Yeah. 3 of our 4 main characters' stories are concluded. They're all dead, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But we really don't know what's going to happen to Alejandro and her kids. When you know the power of this addiction and you know how much she's been participating, really makes you wonder what the future's in store for this small family. But
yeah, I don't think it's good. Like I said in the beginning, it's like there's almost this proposition that sex outside of commitment is detrimental to communities, and you deviate that at your own peril. I think that's kind of what you see. We saw in this, because it's a small town. They're just working class people. I thought it was really cool how it was just it's a very art house movie.
Very art
but
house.
Also very art house. And there's just a few actors, not a lot of people, just a few main characters, and it's just like a small town. It takes place in a small town. It's not a big bustling city.
It almost lies on the outer fringe of horror. It's really like a psychosexual drama.
Yeah.
Certainly some things that happen are horrific, and I get why it falls in the category, but it certainly isn't a straight horror movie as anyone would anticipate it.
Yeah.
For as dominant of a character as the creature is in the story, creature's seen very, very little.
Yeah, it's almost like it's which is interesting. It's almost like the creature is like in the back, is like the backdrop, and like all of the bad moral decisions are done by these people. Like they're the monsters.
Yeah.
This thing's just doing what it does as an alien to survive, and they're the ones who are really making all the moral decisions or immoral decisions.
Yeah, it's certainly a different kind of movie. Again, I didn't.
It's
love
very
it.
tense. There's a lot of uncomfortable imagery in this movie. I think that's probably the strongest part of the horror.
And some of the sexual situations, they show a lot.
Yeah, and it's not like intimate sex scenes. Like it's like meaningless sex. They did a good job of portraying that. Like all the sex scenes just seem meaningless. They're all just doing it.
It's not romantic. It's almost pornographic in its presentation.
Yeah, almost like they're all like kind of suffering while they're doing it. Like there's this like drudgery about it. Like it's just very uncomfortable.
I will say it's very well acted. It's very well shot.
A lot of good cinematography.
There's very little blood. There's very little effects, if you will, save for the few glimpses we get of the creature. Just certainly a different type of horror movie, but
yeah,
interesting.
It was very interesting. I agree. I did not see it coming.
Okay. Well, that is our show for this week, talking about Mexican horror, celebrating the pending Cinco de Mayo. We'll be back next week when our topic is Massacre in the Mall, and we got a couple cool classics we want to talk about next week. But till that time, it will be real fun. Till that time, we appreciate you listening. This is the Weekly Horoscope. I'm Jerry. That is Matt, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, everyone.
Your Weekly Horoscope. with Jerry and Matt.